Welcome to the second of two screencasts looking at exam skills for the Research Methods section at the SY2 A Sociology exam. So remember, there are two questions in the Research Methods section of SY2, and in the previous screencast we looked at the 10-mark question, and in this video we're going to focus on how you answer the 20-mark question. So remember, it's a minute a mark. So the 20-mark question is a mini essay question. You should spend 20 minutes on this section of the SY2 paper, and these questions will generally ask you to explain the strengths and weaknesses of a particular method or research design, or the reasons why a research method is used. So what you can see on the screen at the moment are some examples of 20-mark questions. And if you look at each of these examples, one of the things that you should note is they all start with the same instruction. They all ask you to refer to the item, so you must make reference to the item in your answer, and also they require you to use examples from sociological studies and research. Now, an effective answer to a 20-mark question will contain the following ingredients. Firstly, you need a clear definition of the research method or research design in your opening paragraph, and you should link the method to either primary or secondary research, quantitative or qualitative data, or theoretically to either the positivist or interpretivist tradition. Then in the main body of your answer, you need to evaluate the method or the research design, and you can do that in terms of its practicality, the ethical issues that are involved, the representativeness of the data produced, the reliability of the method, and also its validity. And this acronym, PERV, is a useful way of remembering these key evaluation issues: practicality, ethics, representativeness, reliability and validity. A good answer to a 20-mark question will also refer to studies. Remember, this is an explicit requirement of the question. The question will ask you to refer to real pieces of research as well as also referring to the item. Remember, time management is it's 20 minutes on this particular question, so it is a mini essay question, and depending on the size of your handwriting, most candidates will write between about a side and 2 sides of A4 to this particular part of the SY2 exam. So the diagram that you can see on this particular slide reminds us of these key issues that we can use to evaluate research methods and research designs: their practicality, their ethics, their reliability, their representativeness and validity. And remember, this acronym, PERV, is a good way of remembering these key issues to mention in the 20-mark question. Now, really good answers to 20-mark questions will make reference to this theoretical debate about the best way of producing research in a subject like sociology. So positivism is the theory that argues that sociology should be based as closely as possible on the methods and principles that we associate with research in the natural sciences. And in practice, the more structured, quantitative research methods in sociology are the ones that we would identify as being positivistic. In contrast, interpretivism is the perspective that rejects the scientific method as being a valid way for studying people and social life, and instead this is an approach that focuses on looking for the meanings behind social actions, what Weber refers to as Verstehen. So interpretivism is an approach that we would associate with the more unstructured, qualitative research methods in sociology that give us more depth and context. So this diagram summarises the best way of structuring an answer to a 20-mark methods question. So begin with an introduction where you clearly define the research method or the research design, then the main body of your mini essay, and try to make between about 3 to 4 key points that are fully explained and linked either to the item or other pieces of research that you've learned before going into the exam. And then write your conclusion. And when you're writing your conclusion, don't write something bland like this method has both advantages and disadvantages, because that is obvious. Instead, think about which types of research are best suited to the method that you've discussed and those that are least suited. So horses for courses, that's the idea that a research method suited for one job may not be suited for another job. For example, if I was discussing the usefulness of questionnaires in sociological research, I might conclude by saying that this method is particularly useful when you want simple factual data from a large group of people, but it's not very useful if I wanted much more in-depth information about people's experiences and attitudes. So here's an example of a 20-mark question where you had to explain the strengths and weaknesses of unstructured interviews, and this is a sample paragraph of a good answer to this particular question. So we can see that a key strength of unstructured interviews is identified in the first sentence, this idea that this method is useful for producing valid data, but then that point is fully explained and it's developed and it's linked to this concept of Verstehen. And we've also got an example of a sociologist who has used this particular research method. So in other words, when you're using terms like validity and reliability and representativeness to help you evaluate the strengths and weaknesses of a particular research method, you've got to use these terms in a way that demonstrates understanding of these important methodological concepts. And that means that you've got to explain and link these concepts to the method. Now, because the 20-mark question will always ask you to make reference to real pieces of research, it's vitally important that before you go into the exam, you've got examples of real pieces of research for all of the main methods. And to help you achieve that, if you go onto my YouTube channel and you look at the playlist for research methods, you'll see that there are 2 screencasts that give you lots of examples of key studies that you can use for this section of the SY2 exam. We're going to finish this screencast by looking at one more example, and we're going to look this time at a whole answer to this 20-mark question about sampling. So before we look at the exemplar, hit the pause button, read the item, and then read this question carefully. And now hit the pause button and read through the first section of this model answer. So in this first paragraph, we've got a clear definition of what is meant by sampling, and also this candidate identifies some of the main types of sampling techniques that are used in sociological research. The second paragraph is also an effective discussion of why we might use random sampling, and it links back to the item. Then we've got discussion of why sociologists might want to use a more sophisticated technique called stratified random sampling, and again there's a good example used, this case the example of the crime survey. And then hit the pause button and read through the second half of this model answer. So we can see that in this fourth paragraph, the reasons why researchers might want to use a voluntary sample are explained, and once again there's reference to a real piece of research. And then in the penultimate paragraph, we've got a discussion of why sociologists might want to use snowball sampling, and once again there's reference to real research. And then we've got this final concluding paragraph, and the strength of this final paragraph is that there's an attempt to focus explicitly back to the question set. So this is actually a highly effective answer ridden under test conditions, and this actually got maximum marks, so it got 20 marks out of 20.